Canadians will have spent more than $60 billion shopping online by the end of 2019. That, according to market research firm eMarketer. Unfortunately, some portion of that will purchase counterfeit products. It's a growing problem, and not just in luxury goods. It can be everything from cell phone chargers to toys to toothbrushes. With us now to find out more in Seattle, Washington, Rachel Johnson-Greer, client strategist and founder of Cascadia Seller Solutions, and Jay Green, technology reporter with The Washington Post. In our studio at Laurentian University in Sudbury, Barry Elliott, criminal analyst with the RCMP's Criminal Intelligence Analytical Unit, and here in our studio, Georgina Danzig, a lawyer specializing in anti-counterfeiting and a partner at Kestenberg, Siegel, Lipkus, LLP. Georgina, great to have you here. First time, I think, and to our guests out of town, we're happy you could spare some time for us on TVO tonight. I just want to set up this discussion by reading the following and asking our control room to bring this up if they would. The OECD released a report in March attempting to put some numbers on the issue of counterfeiting, and they found that in 2019, counterfeit goods accounted for 3.3% of all global trade, and that is up from 2.5%, which is the way it was in 2013. And Jay, we'll get you to weigh in first. Why has counterfeiting continued to grow?
I think it's because it's easy. And when you look at online sales in particular, it's hard for folks who are purchasing the products to know they're buying counterfeits. And often with a company like Amazon, it's hard for them to actually detect what's counterfeit online before it gets up there. So I think it makes it easier for these things to spread, across the country.
Barry, let me follow up with you, because sometimes, or maybe a lot of the times, people know they're getting knockoffs and they're probably okay with it. Should they not be okay with it in your view?
Well, it's hard we don't know exactly how many people in Canada are ordering counterfeit, that know they're ordering counterfeit and are happy that they're ordering counterfeit. The key concern we have, especially related to drugs. If you're ordering drugs online, some of this stuff can kill you.
Okay, well, we don't want that. But let's find out how serious this is. Georgina, we know about purses, we know about coats, those are the typical things in your travels. What other kind of odd things have you seen people buy that are counterfeit?
Well, frankly, it's just about everything that you can buy a counterfeit version of. And it's not just about luxury goods. It's soup to nuts. It's, as Barry said, it's from pharmaceuticals to footwear and everything in between. In Canada, we've seen counterfeit electrical products. We've seen counterfeit toothbrushes.
What is a counterfeit toothbrush?
So a counterfeit anything really goes back to who made the product and what brand or trademark is associated with the product. So a counterfeit toothbrush, by way of example, would be a toothbrush that purports to be a toothbrush of a particular company with a trademark associated with that company, and it bears that trademark, only the brush was not made by that company. So the counterfeiter has not given any regard to the health and safety standards and the quality control and the elements that go into, by way of example, making a toothbrush.
Did I hear right? Dental implants as well?
So there's inputs as well. I mean, it's business to business commodities, it's business to consumer commodities. It's basically everything and anything that can be made can be counterfeited.
Well, and Rachel, I'll get you to follow up on what Barry said, because he obviously, part of his job is to make sure nobody dies from this, but how dangerous can counterfeit items be?
We used to do a lot of product safety investigations when I was at Amazon, and I help clients now to solve issues when Amazon comes to them with a customer complaint. And it can be anything from someone who sold something that is actually counterfeit, so it's got somebody else's brand, to someone who just slapped a brand on something they bought direct from a factory in China that doesn't have a brand on it at all. And these folks are not aware of the safety implications. We had one situation where the complaint that came in was a mother who said that pieces of the pacifier clip broke off and her baby was choking on it, and she had to smack her baby's back to get them to cough up the pieces of plastic so they wouldn't choke to death. So it can be very dangerous to use these products.
The theory there being that if it were the genuine article, that would not have happened, I guess, right?
Correct. Anything that's actually been tested appropriately and is produced to safety standards won't break like that.
Okay. Rachel, let me do a few more follow-ups with you, because we are going to focus on Amazon, and you did, as you pointed out, you did work there. And I can't believe this, but according to a market research company, eMarketer, that we quoted off the top, half the households in Canada and the U.S. are members of Amazon Prime. Half. That is amazing. You worked at Amazon for how long?
I was there for about 8 years.
Okay, what did you do there?
So I worked both in the fraud department, so handling these kind of situations, supporting law enforcement with their inquiries, and I also worked in compliance, working on trying to prevent these kind of issues from happening.
Did you find that Amazon was particularly susceptible to counterfeiters?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that, there's two reasons why Amazon is particularly susceptible. The first is because it's just such a big marketplace. It's just a really attractive marketplace for a counterfeiter to sell on because so many people are on Amazon on a regular basis and trust Amazon. And so it's just a very attractive marketplace. And the second reason why they're very susceptible is because Amazon has this idea of reducing friction for customers, reducing friction for sellers, reducing friction to engage with Amazon on the platform. And so they've made it really easy over the years to become a seller and to list new products on Amazon. They haven't made it hard. So it's not as difficult as it might be to sell counterfeit on a different platform.
Gotcha. Jay, as I bring you back into the conversation, I guess we should establish in the interest of full disclosure that the newspaper you work for, the Washington Post, is owned by Mr. Bezos, Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon. So we'll just put that out there for everybody to know. You recently published a story on counterfeit items being sold on Amazon. What were the big takeaways for you on that?
I think a few things, but the big one to me is how easy it is actually to find this stuff. I mean, it's fairly remarkable that you can actually go in there and, I typed in the phrase LV dupes, so Louis Vuitton dupes, and the page is populated with fake Louis Vuitton purses and handbags and all sorts of other things, wallets and whatnot. And it was just fairly remarkable to me how easy it was to find that. And I think the other point speaks to what Rachel just mentioned, which is the reason for that is that the site is so vast, it's hard to police, and Amazon makes it easy for sellers to get onto the site. So right now, on the US site, there's something like 2.5 million third-party sellers, so companies that sell products other than Amazon but use its site to do so. So it's a marketplace. And they sell something like 500 million products on any given day. And so the idea of trying to police every single one of those listings is painfully difficult, if not impossible. And so it's easy for folks who want to scam to post these products onto Amazon's site. And Amazon will tell you it tries to pull the things down after they're listed, but it's hard.
In the midst of that answer, we did bring up a screen grab online from what you get when you put, there it is again, when you put LV dupes, as in Louis Vuitton knockoffs, into Amazon.ca, and you get a whole panoply of options of things that, okay, I don't know anything about this, so you're gonna have to help me on this, Jay. What's a real Louis Vuitton bag cost, and what can you buy one for on Amazon?
Well, so obviously there are ranges for all of these things, but one of their big, I think it's called Never Full handbags. And trust me, I've learned more about handbags and reporting this story than I ever knew beforehand. But you could buy a Louis Vuitton Never Full handbag from Louis Vuitton, and it might be $1,200 or $1,300 US. On the website, you can find a bag that looks awfully similar, same dimensions, same basic patterns, same handled straps and whatnot, for about $50.
That is some serious savings, Georgina. So there's great incentive, I guess, to go for the knockoff if you can't tell the difference, right?
Well, there is an incentive to the consumer, but I think it's important, and this show, will highlight the reasons why consumers should not be gravitating to the knockoffs. I mean, at its core, it's theft. And there are so many reasons. There's health and safety concerns. There's an understanding of who actually is involved in the manufacture and sale of these counterfeit goods. There's been reported links that the financing for terrorist organizations is rooted back to the sellers of counterfeit products. So, who are we? Who do we want to be? What lessons are we teaching our children? What is it that we want to have and hold, and how do we want to represent ourselves?
So for the cost of saving a little money on a cheap bag, we could be actually encouraging a whole lot of other negative stuff at the same time.
Absolutely. And who are making these bags? And I mean, we've just had this Canadian election, and we're focused on environmental concerns, and we're focused on social responsibility. Who's making these knockoffs, and what contributions are they making to Canadian society?
Barry, let me get you back in here. How difficult does it make your job when you have people with the ability to get around sophisticated algorithms who can basically get whatever they want, whenever they want?
Well, I mean, it's the problem we have is, we have Asian organized crime. That's the 99.9% of the problem for Canadian victims. We've linked back through all the purchases to merchant accounts out of 4 state-run banks in China, and most of the packaging, 99.9% of the packaging, is coming out of China. So Georgina's right. I mean, all this stuff is created by organized crime and others, and it's a serious problem. And we're not going to be reaching out and arresting anybody in China too soon, but we can certainly do something about the banks.
Well, that was my next question, because obviously if it's in China, it's well beyond your arm of the law. So what can you do?
Well, we've had a lot of success working with Visa and MasterCard. And as I said before, we identified 4 state-run banks that controlled 99% of the problem. And a year ago, last October at Georgina's law firm's conference, Visa announced that they had permanently terminated the relationship with one of the state-run banks. And that's millions and millions of dollars in lost sales to that bank. And the other 3 were warned that if they don't clean up their act, the same thing is going to happen to them. As a result of that, though, the organized crime groups have spread around the world, and we're having merchant accounts opened up everywhere you can think of.
How about Project Chargeback? Can you tell us about that?
Well, it's been very successful. It's a different approach for the brands and others following the money. And it's been a huge success. A lot of countries have been looking at what we're doing, but we haven't seen too many countries popping up with the same project because they're afraid of dealing with tens of thousands of victims. But we've been able to recover about $15 million for about 50,000 victims since January 2013, working with the Canadian banks. The Canadian banks have been just terrific, and it's all worked out extremely well. Plus, we're getting all this intel on where this stuff is coming from, what banks that it's coming out of.
Georgina, can you follow up on that? He mentioned in the scope of that answer a conference that you recently put on and how you managed to get one of the credit card companies on side to pursue this nefariousness. Tell us about that. What happened?
Sure. Well, just to clarify the record on that, it was actually Barry Elliott and the Chargeback program that was able to orchestrate the shutdown of the bank. So it was announced at the conference. But that having been said, if you go after if you understand that this is often linked to criminal organizations, as Barry has said, and you want to hit them hard, what do? It's one thing to take down a site where somebody might be selling from, but then they're going to pop up another site, and it's a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole. It's very hard to manage anti-counterfeiting using that technique. What the chargeback program does is, in effect, it identifies the merchant processor that is providing services to the vendor. And so you shut down their ability to process a credit card transaction, and that can affect 50, 60, 100 of their sites because they can't use that system anymore to process. So in effect, you're hitting them where it hurts. You're hitting the counterfeiters in the pocketbook, and it's been very effective. On the other side, from the consumer's perspective, Canadian consumers are getting their money back. And that's also an important, and I think an important consideration for consumers and a real advantage through the program that the Anti-Fraud Center.
Rachel, let me get back to your knowledge of the way Amazon does business. They've got this, again, the algorithms are involved here. And I wonder how, based on your experience, counterfeiters are able to game Amazon's algorithms.
Yeah, so I was actually involved in the launch of one of the biggest tools that find these types of products and take them down. It was actually the last big project I worked on before my maternity leave back in 2011, and it's worked very well. It's a very effective program. The problem is that it only works after a listing is created, so you have to create the listing for it to work. The system just doesn't work any other way. That's how it was designed over 20 years ago. So there's no other way to do it than wait until the listing has already been created. And then the second thing that's problematic about it is that Amazon is essentially a search engine, and each of the listings exist in what's called the catalog. And the person who's creating the listing, which is usually a seller, is putting information in. They're keying in keywords, they're typing in various terms that customers might use to find their product. And if they don't use those terms that have been previously flagged, then they won't get stopped. So what ends up happening is you end up creating a really great rule that finds X, Y, and Z of what you're looking for. And then once you've gotten that one done, then the fraudsters go find another term that they're going to use, and then that becomes the new term. And so now you have to find that one. And so it's a constant game of the humans trying to keep up with the humans who are trying to game the system.
As Georgina suggested, she used the example of whack-a-mole a few minutes ago. And I don't know, well, you know more about this than I do, but it seems to me that criminals can be plenty creative and can always stay ahead of the law that is chasing them. Is that in fact what's going on here?
That's exactly what's going on, and that's part of the reason why I feel like in some ways it's kind of partly my fault, because the design that I came up with, 8 years ago, was product focused. It wasn't seller focused. And I think that's where Amazon's gone wrong over the years, is that they continue to be product focused, and they continue to be focused on what this seller is putting up, as though in some way all sellers are in some way good, and it's just the products that might be problematic. And I think that's where they've gone wrong here, is that there's not enough focus on vetting of sellers ahead of time. They do have very sophisticated seller vetting tools, but the fact is, I've worked with clients before who came to us, and obviously didn't stay clients for very long, but they told us, we got one of our accounts shut down. And I was like, wait, one of your accounts? They're like, well, yeah, we have this at our location, we have about 30 computers, and one of our accounts got shut down. I was like, excuse me, you have 30 computers? And this is a pretty common practice amongst these kind of Chinese groups, and this was a Chinese client, potential client. And they actually have whole systems set up, whole consultancies in China, showing them how to create multiple Amazon accounts, how to create shell companies in the US, basically how to look like a legitimate company. And so it gets right past Amazon's review when they're creating their seller accounts.
As we consider what Amazon either has in the past done about this or intends to do in the future, Jay, let me read you a statement they gave. We invited somebody from Amazon to come on the program. They declined the invitation, but they did send us this statement, and it goes like this. Our customers expect that when they make a purchase through Amazon store, either directly from Amazon or from one of its millions of third-party sellers, they will receive authentic products. Amazon strictly prohibits the sale of counterfeit products, and we invest heavily in both funds and company energy to ensure our policy is followed. We work with and empower brands through programs like Brand Registry, Transparency, and Project Zero to ensure only authentic products are sold in our stores. We investigate any claim of counterfeit thoroughly, including removing the item, permanently removing the bad actor, pursuing legal action, or working with law enforcement as appropriate. Jay, before we pick that apart and go through it with a little more specificity, as a general response, how effective do you think that is?
Well, I mean, as we've shown, right, there's plenty of counterfeits on Amazon. And so, the thing that Amazon has prioritized is selection. There are three categories they always talk about when they want to talk about how great their business is, and it's the fact they have great prices, they have vast selection, and it's super convenient to get your products very quickly. And in this instance, they've prioritized selection over some of these other issues with regard to counterfeiting. And so, as Rachel says, they could vet sellers more aggressively at the start, but what that probably would mean is that they would lose selection, and not just selection from people who are selling fraudulent products, but probably selection from people who aren't, but who couldn't meet whatever new barriers Amazon might put in place. And so, that's sort of the rub here. Amazon is deciding that as a competitive issue, it's going to choose selection over some of these other areas.
They did mention three things in that response: Brand Registry, Transparency, and Project Zero. What are those things, Jay?
Well, I can speak to some of them, but broadly what they are is they're programs that Amazon has set up for brands to come and tell them after the fact that there's a product on the site that they believe might be fraudulent. And so we talked about Louis Vuitton, and let's talk about them again. But what essentially they're saying is Louis Vuitton should go to the website, spot those products that they think are fake, and then tell Amazon that, by the way, we think this is fake, you should investigate and take it down. The problem with that is Louis Vuitton has nothing to do with Amazon. They don't want to be on Amazon. They don't want any of their products, even legitimate ones, to be on Amazon. And so to expect them to go to the website, detect a product, and pull it down is a bit far-fetched. It just isn't the kind of thing that you could imagine Louis Vuitton would want to do. But it even goes a step farther because, some of your other guests have mentioned too, I mean, luxury goods is sort of low-hanging fruit for someone like me. It's easy to spot, it's easy to pick out. You can run a graphic on your show and illustrate the point. But there are other things that are much harder to detect on the website. And so we've talked about things like baby food or auto parts. I've also heard about perfumes. And if those are counterfeited, it's actually hard for anybody to know they're counterfeit until they actually arrive on their doorstep, they open it up, and they start to use the product. So it's really hard at that point for a brand to contact Amazon and say, hey, we think this is fake.
Barry, if we're operating on the assumption that this is a bit whack-a-mole, they do something and you try to chase them, how difficult is it for authorities to get proactive about this and actually try to get ahead of the curve here?
Well, we're always going to have counterfeit. I figured that out. We can try to reduce the overall problem and try to educate the public as best we can. But counterfeit's going to be around for a long time. I just want to say, too, that we get a lot more complaints on eBay on counterfeit complaints than we do on Amazon. And we work very closely with PayPal to terminate as many of these PayPal merchant accounts as we can. And we've just developed a relationship with Amazon to share our intel with their group out of California. But yeah, we're gonna be fighting this for a long time to come.
Georgina, let me put you in the head of a consumer right now. When they are purchasing something off a website such as Amazon.ca, do they think that they are for sure getting something that has been tested, that adheres to Canadian standards, and that they can be reasonably assured, therefore, that they're getting something that's decent?
I think the majority of consumers do actually believe that. I know that in my dealings in the anti-counterfeiting space for the last many, many years, I'll often be met with, well, how is it allowed into the country if it's counterfeit? Doesn't Canada Border Services, stop all the counterfeit goods? Or how is Amazon allowed to sell it if it's counterfeit? There is this belief that there is some big umbrella that's making sure that all of Canadians are safe. We have legislation to protect the health and safety of Canadians, but e-commerce and the globalization of trade and the need for the free flow of goods makes the stoppages and the checks associated and needed to keep these goods out of the country and out of the hands of consumers difficult. And I think also the umbrella of Amazon, just the statistics you gave at the beginning of how many Canadians are shopping on Amazon, we just have this belief that in the brand, so then we have a belief in the commodities being sold on the brand. And I think many consumers don't recognize that a lot of these products are coming from third-party sellers. They're not necessarily Amazon product. There's different categories of sellers through the Amazon network. So we have to do our due diligence as consumers. We work really hard for our money, and you have to be pretty informed when you put your money down to buy a product, what it is you're buying and who you're buying it from, and do some due diligence.
It is an indication, Rachel, of how much legitimacy we imbue on places like Amazon or on brands like Amazon, that we just assume that, well, if it's coming off an Amazon website, obviously it's passed all the muster it has to pass along the way. Is there any guess that you might have as to what percentage of stuff is on the Amazon site that actually doesn't pass muster?
It depends on if you're talking about Amazon Canada or Amazon.com. But in my experience from when we first were working on Amazon.ca, it was the majority of items. I can't say the exact amount, but the majority of items hadn't been checked. I can't say whether or not they were actually compliant, but the majority of items were not checked. There was one situation that came to us where a customer had complained that the item was not CSA certified, so it should have a little sign on the back that it says UL and a C in a US, or it should be CSA certified or another legitimate accreditation body. And all I had to do was look at it and could tell that it wasn't actually compliant. And it had sold, dozens of units to Canadians, and there was no check beforehand. And so we immediately turned it off, of course. But that's the problem with a reactive system, is that there isn't anyone checking that, even if it's something as simple as just looking at the packaging and seeing that it isn't actually certified. And that doesn't even address the issue of people who are counterfeiting those certifications, and they aren't actually real. Right. So you have one problem of ignorance, of people just shipping things to Canada because of this kind of weird belief that it's the 51st state, so it's totally okay to ship U.S. stuff to Canada. But then there's this also the problem of malicious actors who are deliberately trying to fake things and deliberately trying to bring it in, and not even just copying somebody else's brand, but just putting some random brand on it, because a lot of consumers don't think about the fact that some random brand on Amazon probably hasn't been checked either.
Georgina, if we look at this stuff and we assume it's been checked by authorities and we assume it's safe, but maybe it isn't, how are we supposed to know? How does an ordinary consumer determine whether or not something's real or fake?
Well, it's a challenge, no question. But if you're an informed consumer, you'll have some understanding of what it is you're buying. So if it's a pretty expensive product or something that you've worked hard to buy and pay for, a luxury good or something of some significance, you might go to the website that is the authorized website for that product and do a bit of a compare. How much is it, in store or on the store's, website?
If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
If it's too good to be, so look at the price.
No.
Who are you buying it from? Do you know who you're buying it from? If it's a third-party seller, like who is that person? Make some inquiry. Stock images are used a lot, so the images on the website can look legitimate and perfect, but when the product comes in, look at the packaging, compare it to the real product. Be an informed consumer, and also be mindful of the method of payment that you're using to purchase online. You want to protect your credit card information. You want to protect your personal information against theft or fraud by nefarious users. So, if you're going to a website and you can't pay through PayPal and you can't pay through your credit card, and they're directing you to another site to pay through a different method that maybe not as secure, that should be a red flag. They're all sort of red flags, and just be an informed purchaser.
You have professional knowledge on this, but I presume at some point along the way you've been a consumer as well.
I am, much to my husband's chagrin, I'm a big consumer.
Do you think you've ever been taken?
Not recently, but I don't shop like most people. It's sort of the fun little bit's been sucked out of it for me, but absolutely, and so too my friends, and I was just speaking to somebody who's in the hair business, telling me about a hair blow dryer that was bought online, and it's of the professional quality, and it failed, and he brought the repair person in, and it was only when they opened it up that they realized it was a counterfeit. And so that could cause a fire. That's somebody's professional reputation. I mean, you just have to be an informed consumer.
Barry, is there anything that can be done if somebody is scammed out of their money or receives a counterfeit product, or is it too late at that point?
Well, I hate to do a commercial for the credit card companies, but the safest method of purchasing anything, anywhere, anytime is with your credit card. You have huge protection on your credit card for not only counterfeit, but non-delivery of goods as described. And it's better than PayPal, it's better than any other protection method out there. So if you do order online and you think you're getting the real thing and you don't, if you pay by credit card, you can get all your money back. All you have to do is call the phone number on the back of your credit card, and customer service at your bank will take care of you.
How many, I hate to use the word victims, but I'm not sure what the better word to use is.
They are victims.
Victims? Okay. How many victims, Barry, do you estimate that you have helped through your professional connection to this issue?
Well, since Visa came out with its new chargeback policy in October 2012, and the fact that we partnered up with the Canadian banks in January 2013, we've helped about 50,000 victims recover about $15 million. We average about 7,000 victims a year. Last year was a busy year for us. We had about 12,000 victims until they closed that Chinese bank. But and that's 0.00 something of the Canadian population. So we're not getting anywhere near what's out there. And a lot of people don't know that they have protection on their credit card. And one of the key things that we're trying to do is educate the public to make sure that they're aware of that protection. And if they have any problems, to call that number on the back of their credit card.
Jay Green, let me give you the last 30 seconds, and it's a bit of an offbeat question, but here goes. How much does your owner of your newspaper like when you look into the company that he has founded?
I've never heard word that he's ever had any opinions about my stories. I've talked with them, in advance of stories, but the policy and everything that the folks at, who are higher up the food chain than I am at the Washington Post will say is he is not involved in any of the news gathering, news reporting operations. So we get to report what we get to report. And my life is writing about Amazon the same way my colleagues write about Facebook or Google or President Trump or Speaker Pelosi or the Pentagon. That's what we do.
Gotcha. Good to know. I want to thank all of you for coming on TVO tonight and sharing your wisdom with us. Jay Green, the technology reporter at the Washington Post. Rachel Johnson-Greer, founder of Cascadia Cellular Solutions. They were both in Seattle. Barry Elliott was in Northern Ontario in Sudbury. He's a criminal analyst with the RCMP's Criminal Intelligence Analytical Unit. And Georgina Danzig, here in our studio, a lawyer specializing in anti-counterfeiting, a partner with Kestenberg, Siegel, Lipkus. Great to have you all on the agenda tonight. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.